Welcome into Real Deal Sports Talk with KP. It is September 13th, 2018. It's Thursday. We are getting to the end of the week. I know some of you are super excited for the weekend. Be excited for tonight as well. We got Thursday night football tonight. We got college football coming up this weekend. We got the baseball season winding down. Basketball and hockey aren't too far away. If you got golf, there's golf going on this weekend as well. A lot of stuff to be excited about. A lot of sports. All is good in the sports world. Now, we can all work to make the world itself a better place. But all is good right now in the sports world. So today on the show, we're going to talk about, of course, NFL Week 2. We'll break down some of the games. I'll give my predictions. We'll go into the Broncos-Raiders rivalry a little bit as they play this weekend. The Knicks, they might have a target. Sherrod Blakely of The Score is reporting that the Knicks have a top target for the 2019 free agency. So we'll get into that. And then Hell in a Cell is coming up this weekend. And WWE put out a poll this week of greatest Hell in a Cell matches ever. So we'll get into that as well. I want to start off, though, obviously, with Week 2 NFL, and we have Thursday night football tonight. The Ravens taking on the Bengals. Both of these teams are 1-0 coming into tonight, both winning their games last week. And if, we got one game to compare them to. If you don't use last week's stats, what they did last week against Buffalo, against Indianapolis, you're basing it on preseason. You're basing it on, prognostication, what you think based on paper it looked like coming into the season, blah, 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 blah. Right? So I say let's analyze these two teams for what they did last week, even though against, lesser opponents, teams that really don't seem to be, nobody expected to be in the playoff run, in the Super Bowl chase this year in Buffalo and Indianapolis. Some people might have thought Andrew Luck coming back gave Indianapolis that edge. He'll make them better, but I don't think he puts them in that category. Not yet anyway. And definitely nobody had Buffalo returning to the playoffs this year as the Ravens went off on them last week. So last week, the Ravens scored 47 points. Cincinnati scored 34. Yards per game, 369 to 330. Baltimore passed for 252 yards. Cincinnati passed for 229. Baltimore ran for 117. Cincinnati ran for 101. Third down conversions, Cincinnati completed half of their third down conversions last week, and Baltimore converted shade less at 42.9%. Time of possession, Baltimore dominated their time of possession last week, and the Bengals also did very well in time of possession. Defensive comparison. This is where the edges can be seen in this matchup. The Ravens gave up 153 yards, albeit to Buffalo. Cincinnati gave up 380 yards. Baltimore gave up 70 passing yards. Cincinnati gave up 305. Baltimore gave up 83 rushing yards. Cincinnati only gave up 75 rushing yards. Baltimore gave up the 3 points. Cincinnati gave up 23 points. Cincinnati allowed over 50% third down conversion, and the Ravens only allowed 13%. Again, this is one game. One team played Buffalo, one team played Indianapolis. But the defensive side of the ball is where I think Baltimore in this matchup has all the advantages. I think on the offensive side of the ball, Baltimore's still trying to figure it out. How are we going to use Flacco? How are we going to use Lamar Jackson? We still have working out our receivers on the outside. Our running back just went down. We put Dixon on the IR. So the offense is a work in progress right now. We'll see where their offense goes. Cincinnati, they re-signed their defensive lineman Dunlap and Geno Atkins, right? Redid their deals, brought them back. You got to get more out of them then. You can't give up that many yards. You can't give up that many passing yards. Now, you did good on the run game, but you got to step up in the passing game. So Cincinnati's defense isn't there yet. We don't know about Cincinnati's offense. There's a lot of good press right now for Joe Mixon and what he's going to be able to do this year. What are we going to get out of A.J. Green and Andy Dalton? Yet to be seen. Who's going to step up and be that true number 2? Can John Ross contribute in a big way? We'll have to see. Both teams win last week. First division matchup. Huge for both of them. It could, this is a game both of these teams very much want to win. Because after this, Cincinnati goes at Carolina, at Atlanta in the next 2. And Baltimore goes home against Denver, at Pittsburgh, and then right after Pittsburgh, at Cleveland. So Denver and then 2 division games right away. So you want to get this win going into, back-to-back weeks or 3 weeks in a row of competitive division or top-tier teams. I have to give the edge to this one in Baltimore. I don't know how you don't take Baltimore in this one. Their defense looks better right now. It looks more complete. Dixon goes down. The receivers, they're still figuring out their passing game very much there, how to incorporate both quarterbacks and everything that's going on. The rookie tight end is dealing with injuries. But to me, again, Baltimore takes the lead in this one. Baltimore holds on to the lead in this one. Even if Cincinnati's able to put some points on the board, Baltimore's defense rides them out. They get the win tonight. Go to 2-0. Bengals drop to 1-1. The list of modern era eligible players for the 2019 Hall of Fame class has been released. We'll get into that a little bit before we get into the rest of the games, because the rest of the games, face it, they're on Sunday, they're on Monday. We covered Thursday night, tonight's game. So there were 91 players that are included. List of modern era nominees for the class of 2019. The Pro Football Hall of Fame unveiled this list today. It has 91 players, 11 coaches, that are eligible to be selected to next year's class. 4 first-time candidates on the list: Tony Gonzalez, London Fletcher, Champ Bailey, and Ed Reed. To me, 3 of those guys are first-ballot guys. London Fletcher probably eventually gets in because of how long he played, the contributions he made on multiple teams. I could see an argument for there. Not if Zach Thomas doesn't get in, though. Zach Thomas should go in before him. Zach Thomas should have gone in before Brian Urlacher. But Tony Gonzalez, first ballot guy. Champ Bailey, first ballot guy. Ed Reed, definitely a first ballot guy. There's 47 offensive players, 39 defensive players, 5 special teamers. So I'm just going to run through the names real quick because it's a lot of names. So quarterbacks: Randall Cunningham, Dave Craig, Jeff Garcia, Donovan McNabb, Steve McNair. Running backs: Sean Alexander, Tiki Barber, Ernest Biner, Larry Centers, Corey Dillon, Eddie George, Edgerrin James, Daryl Johnston, Eric Metcalf, Clinton Portis, Fred Taylor, Herschel Walker, Chris Warren, and Ricky Waters. Wide receivers: Isaac Bruce, Gary Clark, Henry Ellard, Torrey Holt, Chad Johnson, Derek Mason, Sterling Sharp, Rod Smith, Hines Ward. Tight ends: Mark Bavaro, Brent Jones, Jay Novacek. And we already mentioned Tony Gonzalez, obviously. Offensive linemen: Willie Anderson, Tony Baselli, Lomas Brown, Ray Donaldson, Alan Faneca, Chris Hinton, Kent Hull, Steve Hutchinson, Mike Ken, Olin Kreutz, Kevin Mawe, Tom Nalen, Chris Samuels, Richmond Webb, Steve Wisniewski. Defensive line: Leroy Glover, Russell Maryland, Leslie O'Neal, Simeon Rice, Richard Seymour, Neil Smith, and Bryant Young. Linebackers: Carl Banks, Cornelius Bennett, Teddy Bruschi, Seth Joyner, Wilbur Marshall, Clay Matthews, Willie McGinnis, Carl Mecklenburg, Sam Mills, Chris Spillman, Takeo Spikes, Daryl Talley, Zach Thomas. Defensive backs, Eric Allen, Steve Atwater, Rondé Barber, Bill Bates, Leroy Butler, Nick Collins, Thomas Everett, Rodney Harrison, Ty Law, Albert Lewis, John Lynch, Tim McDonald, Dennis Smith, Troy Vincent, Adrian Wilson, and Darren Woodson. Punters, kickers, Jason Elam, Jeff Fiegels, Sean Landetta. Special teams, Brian Mitchell and Steve Tasker. Steve Tasker needs to be in. Coaches, Don Coryell, Bill Cower, Tom Flores, Jim Hannafin, Mike Holmgren, Jimmy Johnson, Richie Patabon, Dan Reeves, Marty Schottenheimer, Clark Shaughnessy, and Dick Vermeil. 18 finalists will be presented to the full 48-member Pro Football Hall of Fame Selection Committee during its annual meeting on Selection Sunday, the day before the Super Bowl. The finalists will consist of 15 modern-era finalists, the recently named senior finalist, Johnny Robinson, and the contributor finalists, Pat Bolin and Gil Brandt. The selection committee will meet Saturday, February 2nd, 2019 in Atlanta, Georgia, to elect the class of 2019. While there is no set number for any class of enshrinees, the selection process bylaws provide that between 4 and 8 new members will be selected. The senior finalist and contributor finalists are voted yes or no for the election at the annual selection meeting and must receive at least 80% support from the committee to be elected. The modern era finalists will be trimmed during the meeting from 15 to 10 and then from 10 to 5. The remaining 5 finalists will be voted on individually yes or no and must receive the same 80% positive vote as the senior and contributor finalists to earn election into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. The class of 2019 will be announced during the NFL Honors Nationally Broadcast Award Show, and the Pro Football Hall of Fame class of 2019 will be formally enshrined Saturday, August 3rd, 2019 in Canton, Ohio. All of this information is on NFL.com. They put it out today. You can go check it out. That's a long list. There's a lot of players I remember loving growing up watching there, and a lot of players there that I think are really good. Maybe not Hall of Fame, but the Hall of Fame's kind of becoming the Hall of really good. So we'll see. Well, it's a fun process to watch, and we're going to work our way through it for sure. We'll cover it as it goes along. All right, let's move into, I want to talk about Broncos-Raiders next. Now, this is a rivalry for me. It's always going to be a rivalry for me because I grew up in Denver, Colorado. It never mattered how good these teams were. It didn't matter if the Broncos were bad. It didn't matter if the Raiders were bad. Both sides considered themselves to have a good ceiling. Both fan bases considered themselves to have a good season if they beat the other one. You could go 2-14, but then those fan bases would tip their hats and go, you know what, but we beat the Raiders, or well, we beat the Broncos. And they can talk about it in, not so nice terms. They have bad words that go back and forth, and names and nicknames and memes and gifs and all kinds of stuff. That's what makes it good. There's been bad instances in their games. There's been good instances in the games. The road wins for both teams have been great. I can remember going with my dad to a Broncos-Raiders Monday night game probably 15 years ago or more on Monday night, and it was snowing in Denver, and it was probably 20 degrees outside, blizzard conditions, and the Raiders just tore them up, just beat them up. Ran all over the field. I think Tyrone Wheatley was scoring touchdowns. It was ridiculous. These two teams date back. Their first meeting was October 2nd, 1960. Their last meeting last year was in November 26th. The Raiders won their last meeting 21-14, obviously, and they play this Sunday. They've played 117 games, including the playoffs, and the Raiders' lead in this series, which used to be vast, is slowly closing now. The Raiders' lead is 63-52-2. That gap used to be much larger, much larger. The Broncos over the last 2 decades or so have started to close that gap down. These are two teams, it's hard to explain. These are two teams I watched playing. The Raiders always were that team that had a ton of penalties. They still are. They go through these spurts of being a good team, and then they disappear for years and years at a time. There's so much hype around this team coming back right now. You have John Gruden. Reggie McKenzie's there, who I've been touting for a while, but I'm now kind of questioning. And you have these different rosters. You have different players. It's a different rivalry each and every year as these rosters have turnover. And you look at the two teams right now, and starting with the Broncos, their offensive unit is pretty solid. I like their skill players. Emmanuel Sanders, Cortland Sutton, Tim Patrick on one side, Demaryius Thomas, and then Deshaun Hamilton on the other side receivers. That's a solid receiving group. You have length, you have speed, you have size, you have route running, you have quickness, shiftiness, great playmakers at the receiver position. Their offensive line is playing much better in week one than I expected it was going to be at all this year. I thought that would be the downfall for Case Keenum, was that this offensive line still wasn't going to be ready. But Garrett Bowles had a good game. Ron Leary's knee didn't seem to be bothering him last week. Paradis is healthy. Connor McGovern, he's a solid guy. He's never going to be an all-pro, but he's a good guard. And Jared Valdir held up on the right side. Those are all pluses when you have those kind of weapons on the outside, that your offensive line is playing well, that you have a Case Keenum who's a bona fide starter in the NFL and not, a stable of backups or threes competing to start for you. They need to get more out of their tight end position. Jeff Hireman, Jake Butt, they need to step up. They need to figure out how to get open and make some plays because they haven't got a lot there. Royce Freeman, I predicted he was going to be the starter. He looks good as the starting runner. I think they need to get him some more touches. Phillip Lindsay, great secondary back, can go inside, outside passing game. That means they are not tipping their hat if they need to get Royce Freeman a spell on what they're going to do, bringing a Phillip Lindsay into the game. And Booker, he's your last guy. You're bringing him in other situational downs where you don't want to use Lindsey and you want a different kind of a matchup, more of that Royce Freeman size type thing. And it gives you options. Teams can't just go, oh, I know who you brought into the game. I know what you're doing there. Now you have options. You have dynamic playmakers. Everybody saw what Phillip Lindsay was able to do last week. I only expect Royce Freeman's touches to get better, and Devontae Booker is a very nice third option, even though he's listed second on their depth chart. Chad Kelly is your 2 quarterback. Case Keenum getting you start, and Janovich is a stud for fullback. Then you look at the defense. Derek Wolfe, I told you guys before, if I were him, I probably would have retired with the neck injuries and not feeling my arms, not feeling my feet, things like that. But he's back right now. He's healthy. He's playing like the beast that he was a few seasons ago. D'Amato Pecco is solid. Shelby Harris is coming along very nicely. Adam Gotsis has really stepped up this year. And then you have linebackers, outside linebackers galore with Bradley Chubb, Von Miller, Shaquille Barrett, Shane Ray, just bringing it from all over the place. Now, their inside linebackers can't cover nobody for anything, but they can play the run. So you have Todd Davis, you have Brandon Marshall, you have Josie Jewell, who's a rookie and expect to get better. Joe Jones got some time. The back end, Bradley Roby, Chris Harris Jr., Darren Stewart, Justin Simmons, you got some talent there. You bring in a Pac-Man Jones. He gives you some more depth. You have an Isaac Yadam who can now come along and learn. Tremaine Brock, another vet who can get in there and take some snaps when needed. Will Parks has been coming along so nicely. DeMonte Thomas, a young safety. They bring back Shamarko Thomas this week. This is a Broncos team that if they don't beat themselves, they're going to be very good this year. Now, the Raiders, a lot of people say last week they did beat themselves, and there might be something to that because they played very good for most of that game, even though they lost 33-13. That pick six makes the score balloon, and the 3 turnovers, those are hard to overcome on the NFL level. But you look at their offensive line, it's still solid. And when I did my predictions earlier just a couple weeks ago and spoke about the Raiders, I said if this offensive line plays like it did 2 years ago and not like it did last season, this is going to be a much better team because they have Rodney Hudson at center. They have Gabe Jackson and Kelechi Osemele at guard. They have a Colton Miller and Donald Penn at tackles. So road graders, big, giant guys who are going to want to be physical and push you out of the way. And who's that good for? Oh, that's right, your physical running back in Marshawn Lynch, who then is spelled by a Doug Martin, who you bring in a DeAndre Washington to be your speed off-pace guy. So they have some talent on the offensive side of the ball. Derek Carr had a bad game last week. I hope they don't do something and decide to start trying to make A.J. McCarron their starter. But, you never know with John Gruden what's going to happen. They're building for Vegas. Now, the defense has got to step up. You can't give up 33 points and expect to win week in and week out. So what do? They have some young guys, but they go and they bring in Jonathan Hankins this week. They bring in Clinton McDonald, who, if he's healthy, is going to be a great contribution. Right after I put on the show, Martavis Bryant wasn't going to be on the team. They bring him back in. So apparently he's not going to get suspended. Again, Jordy Nelson, Jared Cook went off last week. Broncos can't cover the tight ends. They're going to have to come with something special there. So we'll see. I'm not going to write the Raiders off as done like some people did. I also don't think right now, after week 1, week 2, preseason, current roster, that I see a Super Bowl contender. But I'm not writing them off. They're still in the thick of it in the AFC West. I don't see how anybody can write them off after one performance. And it's going to be a great game either way. The Broncos have a solid roster. The Raiders are a big physical team. You put those things together and, well, it's going to make for a good game. These teams are told not to like each other. John Gruden is 1-9 as a coach against the Broncos. He would like nothing more than to beat all of his division rivals this year, even if those are the only 6 games that the Raiders win. Believe that. If Chucky only gets 6 wins this year, he will take those 6 wins against the Chargers, the Chiefs, and the Broncos. This is an exciting game. I used to live right over by the Broncos Stadium, and watching the Raiders fans and the Broncos fans and the smack talk and the positive smack talk where it wasn't about getting violent and messing people up or hurting anybody. I loved it. I loved it all. The shock and the awe of the mystique and, the stories that are true and not true. And it's coming down to, their 118th matchup. Raiders have the lead. All-time series. The Raiders made, I think, the 3 additions they made, Martavis Bryant, Clinton McDonald, and Jonathan Hankins. If they all play this week, I think they make a huge impact on whether or not the Raiders compete this week. Had they stayed pat with the same rosters that they had last week, I don't know that it gets done. They don't have the pass rush. Khalil Mack's gone. They need more rotation, more depth so those guys can stay healthy and make more splash plays as a unit and not having that one individual that teams have to worry about, because now you're worrying about the unit and not a guy. Because at this point, why are we going to talk about Mack anymore? It's done. It's over with. Both teams, both sides, all parties have to move forward. The rest of the schedule coming up, and then we'll get into my picks, and I'll tell you who I'm picking for each game. All right, so Ravens-Bengals tonight. Then the Panthers at the Falcons. Nice NFC South matchup. I expected more from the Panthers last week. I expected the Falcons to win last week. So what am I expecting this week? I'm expecting more from the Falcons this week, and I'm still expecting more from the Panthers this week. I thought we'd see a lot more use of Christian McCaffrey from Norv Turner in Game 1. We didn't see it there. The Falcons have injuries at safety and linebacker. Maybe they try and expose that this week with a guy like Christian McCaffrey, with a Curtis Samuel, with some of these other small-type weapons they have. The Colts are at Washington this week. Washington, very impressive last week. Alex Smith once again did his thing. starting to get into a groove with Jordan Reed. I think they're going to be a nice little impressive team. They might sneak up on some people in that NFC East. The Colts, clearly still a work in progress. It'll be nice, though, to still see, here's another week of Andrew Luck. Let's see what's going on there. How's the shoulder looking? How's the team looking? Texans fall to New England last week. Titans lose last week as well. This is an AFC South battle. In my opinion, the Texans are a much better complete team right now. The Titans are kind of a try hard, work hard, make sure my assignment's right team right now. Missing some playmakers on both sides of the ball. Eagles are at Tampa Bay. Eagles did not look good last week, in my opinion. The defense looked solid, of course, because it's legit. Buccaneers put up a lot of points last week. I don't expect that to be the case for the entire season, even with the Deshaun Jackson and Mike Evans on the outside there for Tampa Bay. The Chiefs are at Pittsburgh. This could be a potential AFC Championship matchup. Doesn't look like right now Le'Veon Bell's coming back this week. A lot of the chatter is done. They're moving forward. They're trying to be focused on what they got doing. The Chiefs are speed, they're youth, they're athletic, and they're just going to go for it. And if it works, great. And if somebody stops them, well, we'll play again next week. That's what I'm getting from the Chiefs right now. I'd like to see their defense be on the same level as the offense. That would be something truly special. Another AFC East matchup, you have the Dolphins taking on the Jets. This will be a fun one. I think these teams coming into the season for me were pretty much evened up. The Jets looked great last week against Detroit. You got the Chargers at the Bills. Bills, they're just like Detroit. You're hoping those teams bounce back this week. Those were hard losses for both of those teams last week. LA, I'm telling you, this is a Chargers team. There's just something about them. It doesn't matter how much talent they have. They find ways to lose instead of finding ways to win. It's almost like they've got to get revved up before the season gets started for them. Unfortunately, that's not happening in the preseason. That's what's happening in the first few weeks of every regular season now for them. So maybe going into Buffalo, is going to help the Chargers kind of break that, turn the ship around, use some of that talent, and move things forward. The Vikings are at the Packers. We're hearing it's a knee sprain for Aaron Rodgers and that he's going to be going through rehab stuff this week. He can definitely play on Sunday without practice, in his opinion. This is a Vikings team that gave them a lot of trouble last year. Remember, they knocked him out for part of the season last year. That's why we have this new rule that you can't land on the quarterback when you tackle him. Well, unless you're playing Detroit, then you can do whatever you want. They don't throw the flags. And Minnesota's solid. We saw what they did against San Francisco last week. The defense is still legit there in Minnesota. They have playmakers on the outside. They have a two-headed running attack. They have a tight end who's consistent. This is a quality team. The Packers have a lot on their hands this week. Cleveland is going into New Orleans. It'd be great to see Baker Mayfield go at it with Drew Brees as the two, shorter guy quarterbacks in the NFL. But Tyrod Taylor has definitely earned the respect of the team and that starting role, and he's doing good. I mean, he's leading that team. They're putting up points. They're moving the ball. The defense is playing real solid. They're flying around. Greg Williams has them playing physical and fast. Detroit is going into San Francisco. Rematch of Super Bowl coordinators, Patricia and Kyle Shanahan. What do you say here? You got Jimmy Garoppolo, high-paid quarterback. Didn't play all that great last week. Took his first loss in 8 starts. You have Matthew Stafford, did not play well last week. That whole team, coaching staff from top to bottom, did not do anything good last week. 49ers ran into a Vikings team last week that was loaded on defense, was a little more prepared in the early season to do what they needed to do and accomplish their goals. 49ers still working towards that. The Lions, your goals are wide open. You wanted to improve the running game. We did not see that last week, according to Pro Football Focus. TJ Lang and I don't remember which other lineman, but TJ Lang and one of the other Detroit Lion linemen were two of the best in pass protection last week. I'd have to go back and watch the film because it just seemed like our guys got blown up all over that game. Arizona is going into LA to take on this juggernaut of a Rams team right now. The offense is going. The defense, they're still trying to figure it out. I know they held Oakland to 13 points. You take away those 3 interceptions, who knows how many points that Rams defense that looks so loaded on paper would have given up. Nice to get the pick 6 there for Marcus Peters. NFC West matchup. Cardinals don't have a lot going right now offensively. They're still figuring it out. David Johnson is still getting things going. They're going to have to figure out their rhythm, their base, their pace, especially against this Rams team. Patriots and Jags, that is a big one on Sunday afternoon, same time as the Raiders-Broncos game. Patriots looked good last week. It's a process for them. You got Belichick, you got Brady. Let's plug in the pieces. We're going to keep the machine rolling. We're going to game plan each and every week. We're going to game plan to hit your weaknesses with our guys' strengths, and we're going to put each guy in a position to be successful and not just put a guy in a system and say this is the system we're going to play. You got to respect the game. Jaguars, young, physical, badass defense. Offense, we'll see if Fournette plays. He's saying he's a game-time decision right now. To me, that means he's playing. Bortles, you still need more out of him in that receiving group. Raiders-Broncos, we broke that game down a little bit as it's the rivalry game here in Denver this week. Then on Sunday night, you have another big rivalry game as the Giants go into Dallas to take on Jerry Boys and want to make a statement. You know, they didn't get the W last week at home against Jacksonville. Here it is. You got a division game against your big rival, week 2, national television in Jerry's world. You want to come in and you want to make a statement in this game. Odell wants to make a statement in this game. Barkley wants to make a statement in this game. Hell, Eli, if he were going to admit it, wants to win this game. More so than other ones on the schedule. Des Bryant's hanging out with Jerry Jones at the Beyonce Jay-Z concert. Des Bryant's not coming back to Dallas. He just got good seats that way. He was also backstage. That was a silly report. Giants, all kinds of weapons. Defense, they're working it out. Cowboys, not all kinds of weapons. If you shut down Zeke, what receiver do you really worry about for Dallas right now? What tight end are you really worried about for Dallas right now? Dallas's pass rush has to get going in this game. They have to make havoc. They can't let Eli get comfortable in the pocket. You have to expose Eric Flowers on the right side. Will Hernandez and Nate Soldier on the left side are solid. So you're exposing that right side of the offensive line the whole game. You're coming right at Eli's face. You want to make him feel uncomfortable. You want to push the pocket. You don't want to give him time to find Odell, to find Sterling Shepard, to find Evans, to hit Barkley in the flat. Shoot, you don't want to give him time to hand the ball off if you're Dallas in this game. Your linebackers need to step up. You can't make any mistakes on the outside and bite on double moves or play fakes, play action. You have to be solid in this game against the Giants' weapons. That's how people beat the Giants. You stay solid against their weapons, you got a chance. You're not solid, you give a little space, you bite on a double move, they're going to burn you. They're going to beat you. So you're attacking Eric Flowers. Giants on defense, do your best. That Dallas offensive line is still solid, even though they're injured and missing pieces. Then on Monday night, you have the Seahawks at the Bears. Bears defense looked good for part of the game. Then they looked like the Bears for the second half of the game. The Seahawks clearly have holes. They're going to be a team that's going to be as good as Russell Wilson once again this year. The defense isn't going to be top ranked. It'll probably still be in the top half of the league, but it's not going to be a top 10. So average teams here who both fan bases have, a stake at saying our team can win this game on Monday night. You got a young quarterback in Trubisky taking on what some people are calling a Hall of Fame quarterback in Russell Wilson. Doug Baldwin's going to be out for several weeks. Carlson, they're going to have to figure out and lean on that running game a little more. Yafetti's going to have to block better for him than he did last week against Denver. But, come on. Football's back. It's great. I got Baltimore beating Cincinnati. I'll take Atlanta to beat Carolina. Washington over the Colts. Houston over Tennessee. Philadelphia over Tampa. I'm taking KC to beat Pittsburgh. I'll take the Jets over Miami. The Chargers to beat Buffalo. Minnesota over Green Bay. New Orleans to beat the Browns. I'm taking San Francisco over Detroit because Detroit, you're my team, one pride. This is going to be the first time I've picked against you, but you're going to have to prove that you're solid in one facet of the game before I can not. I got to be real. That's the name of the show, Real Deal Sports Talk. So I got to be real. Until you prove it, I can't pick you to beat a team that's equally as good or that, has the ability to expose you on defense. So I'm taking the 49ers at home. I'll take the Rams over the Cardinals, the Patriots to upset Jacksonville at home, Denver over Oakland, Chicago over Seattle, and I'm taking the Giants to get past Dallas in Jerry's world. 2019 seems kind of far away right now to be talking about 2019, but Sherrod Blakely of The Score is reporting that the Knicks' top target in 2019 free agency class is going to be Kyrie Irving. Now, this is a class that could potentially be loaded with a lot of talent. Kevin Durant, Jimmy Butler, and the list goes on and on. It could be a very huge free agent class. Now, the Knicks might have, depending on how they work some deals, around $30 million excuse me, in cap space going into next summer. Could take around $33 million to get a guy at a max contract like a Kyrie Irving. And you're going to have competition from other teams. You're going to have competition from Brooklyn. You're going to have competition from the 76ers. You're going to have competition from Boston, from LA. There's going to be other teams in big markets that are going to be looking to make a splash in free agency next summer, especially with LeBron James. Right now, they're talking about $109 million the cap could be up to. It could extend past that, they're saying, based on, what LeBron's deal in LA does for revenue and with the revenue sharing and all the things like that. Now, let's say they manage to sign Kyrie Irving. Does that then make the Knicks more of a contender in the East? With here's the current roster going into this season: Ron Baker, Trey Burke, Damian Dotson, Tim Hardaway Jr., Mario Hezonja, Isaiah Hicks, Jared Jack, Ernest Cantor, Kevin Knox, Luke Cornett, Courtney Lee, Emmanuel Mudiay, Joakim Noah, Frank Ntilikina, I know I messed your name up, sorry, Kristaps Porzingis, Mitchell Robinson, Lance Thomas, Alonzo Trier, and Noah Vonleh. Now, that's going into the season. Obviously, they're going to cut that down. Some of these guys are going to end up being traded before 2019. Some of these guys are going to end up cut or just pushed to the side. Emmanuel Mudiay, he never developed into what anybody thought he would so far. Kristaps Porzingis is coming back from an injury. Ernest Cantor's a role player. You basically have a bunch of role players. Tim Hardaway, every now and then, he goes off for some points. So does this make them a contender in the East? No. It would make them better in the East, but I don't know that it makes them a contender. Now, there's a bunch of contenders this week. Hell in a Cell 2018 coming this week on Sunday night. And Hell in a Cell, it's the match that takes place in the cages. You got some big matches for the WWE this week. A couple of them actually will be in a Hell in a Cell. You have Roman Reigns, the Universal Champion, taking on Braun Strowman inside the cell. You have AJ Styles, who's the WWE Champion, taking on Samoa Joe. You have Charlotte Flair taking on Becky Lynch, which we all thought was going to be a Hell in a Cell match, but it's actually just going to be a regular match for the title. Ronda Rousey taking on Alexa Bliss for the Raw Women's Championship. Another Hell in a Cell match, Jeff Hardy and Randy Orton. Daniel Bryan and Brie Bella, husband and wife, taking on The Miz and Maurice, husband and wife. Dolph Ziggler and Drew McIntyre, tag team champion match against Seth Rollins and Dean Ambrose. You have the New Day and the SmackDown champion taking on Rusev Day and Aiden English. And then the WWE goes out this week because it's Hell in a Cell, and they put out a poll. I'm not going to break down all the matches because whatever. I'm here about this poll. I just wanted to get that out there. And they said the greatest Hell in a Cell match ever, and they listed 6 matches. Now, instantly, my mind jumps to one specific match when you hear Hell in a Cell, and it's the only one that could be considered the greatest in my opinion. Now, it is on their list, but here's their list that they ran their poll with. Shawn Michaels versus The Undertaker. Undertaker versus Mankind. Triple H versus Cactus Jack. Undertaker versus Triple H. Sasha Banks versus Charlotte Flair. And The New Day versus The Usos. Okay? Now, obviously, there's one Hell in a Cell match that can be the greatest of all time, period, and that's The Undertaker versus Mankind, because that is the match of all matches that made the Hell in a Cell what it is. That went above and beyond what they were scripted, what it was wrote, what Mick Foley brought to it for the fans. Broken ribs, broken leg. His tooth went through his lip into his nose. In the match, he falls off the top of the cage through an announce table, falls through the top of the cage into the ring, which they then scripted that part into the next time that he did that same thing as Cactus Jack against Triple H, I believe. And it was not scripted that time against The Undertaker. Everybody thought that he had died when that happened because it wasn't supposed to happen that time. That match, by far, what Mick Foley did, the way he wrestled, the way he put his body on the line, there's no way you can say there's a better Hell in a Cell match to this date. Now, Braun Strowman, Roman Reigns, I don't see that competing with it. Now, Jeff Hardy, Randy Orton, maybe. Because of Jeff Hardy. Jeff Hardy's going to be willing to do the same kind of stuff Mick Foley did. And that in itself could create a great Hell in a Cell match, or maybe the greatest of all time, because we've seen what Jeff Hardy has done in ladder matches and other kind of death-defying matches. So it's going to be an exciting weekend for NFL fans, for college football, which we didn't get to talk about today, for baseball fans, for sports entertainment, WWE fans. It's all out there this weekend. It's Thursday, September 13th. Get through one more day. Enjoy your weekend. And until next time, you know how we do. Just be real.